Rogue and Mad now activated. It was only a banger line in the rap battle of summer 2020, but little did we know it predicted the future. In Europe, we only ever have known two champions, Fnatic and G2, holding 15 titles between them, and one stray alliance. And why is that? It's because winning a title in Europe is difficult. You need consistency, you need development, you need to adapt to rapidly changing metas and new talent year after year, and you need to peak at the right time. You also need to deal with the pressure. The pressure of being down match point, the pressure of thousands of fans, the pressure of realizing that you may only ever get a few chances to lift the trophy in Europe, if you're lucky. The pressure that here in Europe, we hold our teams to a higher standard. Rogue and Mad, they embody everything we pride ourselves here on in the LEC. Rogue, they are a pinnacle of investing in talent and developing them over the years. Rogue saw what they had in the Diamonds in the Rough, Inspired and Larson, and stuck with their young talent, making necessary roster moves when needed. As the mid and jungler blossomed, Hansama offered that ADC experience in the bot lane, Odawamne became the top lane rock they needed, and Trimby came into his own as one of the best supports in Europe. All that is left is a crowning achievement, because I can assure you all of them wake up in a cold sweat once every few weeks, reminiscing about that lost Game 5 versus the Mad Lions. Now the Mad Lions, the current champions who came out of nowhere, upsetting the status quo that had reigned here in EU for so long. They took down G2 the first time, and people said it was a fluke, it was an anomaly, a flash in the pan, but they did it again, and they went on to win the championship. And now, they find themselves in a rematch versus Rogue. Mad mirrors Rogue in those same values we cherish. Scouting and bringing in TCL champion Armut, going all in on rookie talent El Yoya, from Spain to LEC champion to MSI semifinalist to Worlds in 1 year. 1 year! That is unheard of. And there is a reason it happened at the Mad Lions. Anchored by Humanoid, who now has to be named as one of the best in Europe, and a bot lane of Carzzy and Kaiser who step up when the team needs them the most. It will take a long time to shift the narrative that G2 and Fnatic are the best Europe has to offer. But right now, they are not. Right now, the King's match between Rogue and Mad Lions is the best League of Legends you can watch in Europe, because they are the new standard. Let's see who locks their spot in the LCS LEC Summer Final next Sunday. Welcome everyone to the LEC studio in Berlin, where dreams come true. Mad Lions and Rogue, they have stepped up as the best two teams in 2021. And today they clash on the same stage where they carved their names into history back in spring. The reigning champions, they claimed the title with a reverse sweep, and now Rogue are looking to take their revenge and make it back to the finals. We got to look at that Game 5 in the match history just before the start of the show, Treatz and Guldborg. And I mean, once again, Guldborg, I was taken so aback by the fact that Rogue were so far ahead and that the Mad Lions turned it on its head for the championship.
I mean, it's still a strong story nowadays that we can think of, and I think even throughout today and even throughout the players, they are thinking back until that day, because it was crazy when it happened. I think most people just thought that that was going to be a clean throw for Rogue until it wasn't.
Yeah, Treatz, how big of a hit is that when you're so close to getting that thing that you've wanted for so long and it gets pulled from your grasp?
Yeah, I think the Rogue players are still thinking back to this day and the Game 5, and it feels even worse when it was so close and in their own grasp. If it was Mad Lions smurfing the entire game, then it's a different story. But yeah, it was a close one, but Mad just edged out.
They
barely.
did, and we'll see what happens today. Hopefully another 5 games. Now, yesterday we, of course, saw Fnatic's journey in the lower bracket continuing with another 5-game thriller. Guldborg, you got to cast it. What did you think?
I mean, this was definitely a game with a lot of blood. I think we had more than 1 kill per minute, specifically in the first 4 games, and it was a game where people were willing to pull the trigger. I think Fnatic specifically sometimes threaded a fine line between an overstep and an engage that was just super good with their proactivity. And that game 5, I mean, ended up with a bit of an A run, but nonetheless a super nice series to watch.
Niski, I think, deserves a bit of special praise specifically for that game 5, Treatz.
Yeah, he really stepped it up when his team needed it, and he had an insane TF performance, showing why TF into LeBlanc can be very good.
Exactly. You know, it was a brawl for 4 games, and then all of a sudden the pressure hit, it seems like, Treatz, right, in that game 5, where it was all more cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah, especially after these 4 bloody games, I think both teams realizes, like, this is the last game and we need to win it if we want to make it to Worlds potentially. So stakes are higher and everyone stops killing each other on the Rift.
Taking a deep breath. Now, this does mean that we have to say goodbye to the Misfits. They are out of Worlds contention, out of playoff contention, and the winner of Fnatic versus G2 will be our last representative at Worlds. I do want to take a minute to close the chapter on Misfits' 2021 season because it ends on such a sour note, Guldborg, but I think it should be commended for the way the season went for the org overall.
I think you have to take a look at the expectations that came into Misfits as well when playoff happened, because a lot of the question was, is this just a best of 1 team? Is that all they can do? But I think they strongly proved that they can go to that full game series. They did it multiple times, and you know, it's just that last hurdle where they couldn't make it, but I think they shadowed expectations.
Yeah, great growth from them throughout the summer.
Yeah, Misfits was always a team that was kind of difficult to play against in a best of 1, but I think it shows a lot of strength from them to be able to do in a best of 5 as well. And yeah, they were really close, but not quite there.
No, so heartbreaking for the Bunnies, but super excited to see what Misfits will do in the coming years. Now, with yesterday's result, we now have a clash of titans for the last world spot as G2 and Fnatic face off tomorrow with everything on the line. Fnatic versus G2 versus the last spot in Worlds, and we've seen these 2 orgs clash so many times in the LEC, but directly for that World spot, Guldborg, that is just kind of, oh, that is so delicious. That is an extra notch on the rivalry.
Quite honestly, it's nerve-wracking to think of specifically because if you just go back a few years, that was just that was this normal story you would always expect. Fnatic and G2, we'd have them in the finals. It was all it was about, and now this time around, we're not seeing both of them. Only one can go to Worlds, and that is crazy.
Treatz, you told me yesterday, remember, Upset has never been to Worlds, and then when we look across his lane to Reckless, the guy that made the jump to G2 for that international success once again and that chance for the title. Unbelievable, the pressure on these 2 players.
Yeah, I think for both teams, it's kind of weird that they're fighting for a world spot. Usually they're the given teams, but yeah, times have changed, and it's kind of crazy to think that now only one of them can go to Worlds, and only one of these insane AD carriers can go to Worlds as well.
As well as kind of the added stakes, I think, because we talk about the Worlds qualification because that is, of course, the end-all, be-all. You want to make it there. But these teams are also thinking, hey, Matt and Rogue are stealing our thunder. We are also here to be reckoned with when it comes to Europe. We want to make it back to the final as well.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that, but I also think that there is a long road for these teams to get on, because it's the road tomorrow, and then it's also the road against these younger teams that's coming out and clashing, because as you rightfully mentioned yourself, these 2 teams, they are no longer the kings of Europe.
They aren't. Very interesting tomorrow. There's tons of cool League of Legends across the world, but also a lot to look forward to next weekend. We have the LEC Summer Finals, and right after that, the opening of the EU Masters group stage. For a small preview, here's Laure.
Thank you, Sjokz. We are 10 days away from the EU Masters, and this week our playing IRL teams battled and 4 of them advanced to the main event to complete our 4 groups. Here's a TLDR if you missed the action. After dropping a couple games in Group D, Mouse came out victorious in their tiebreaker versus Ego Rogue and smashed Sinner Esports 2-0 in their qualifying best of 3. Spring LEC mid laner Chocolate is back and hungry and showed the supremacy of Polish Corki with a very clean playing performance overall. if Mouse is a team we've been used to seeing on the EU Master stage, they are still looking for their first EUM title, and they have a difficult task ahead as they were seated in what looks to be our summer group of death. Now, over to Spain with the Movistar Riders and the great return of a former player, British jungler Max Laure. He made the World's quarterfinals back in 2017 and is now finding success once again in the IRLs. The Spanish third seed was by far the most dominant team in the play-ins, and Max Laure also got to shine with a very great inspired cosplay. Although he couldn't get the penta, he grabbed 2 quadra kills with Diego as Movistar Riders made it to the main stage. Now, looking at the main event, yesterday we had LFL champion Agresivoo from Misfits premiere in the LEC studio, and we got some thoughts from him on the LFL chances.
Okay, so I would assume that both of the LFL teams will get first place in their groups. Like, I think we are the favorites for sure. LFL is probably the best national league, and the K-Corp proved it last split. And also looking at our groups, I think for us at least it's pretty easy. Maybe for K-Corp a little bit harder, but I would assume that we still both get first place. I think the group of death is the group that has the strongest team from the plains, and I think from the plains the strongest team was Mouse, I guess, and it's also in the group with K-Corp, so I think that's the group of death. It's pretty hard, like the level of the teams is pretty similar, but also I would say that all of the groups are like fun to watch, so it's not only about their group. I think all of the groups are not that easy.
It will be fun to watch for sure, but I just need to remind everyone of the supremacy of the LFL in spring, as K-Corp will be looking to prove their dominance once again on the EU Master stage and defend their spring title. But the Blue Wall may not be the invincible force they were in spring, as Misfits Premier managed to take them down in our French finals and grab the first seed for themselves in a very tense series. Now let's take a look at the 4 groups we have, because as we said earlier, the Group D looks to be the most difficult or competitive, with Midijux Vodafone Giants and our EUM Spring winners. But I want to keep my eyes on Group C in particular, with Berlin International Gaming, who dominated the Prime League finals, and after a disappointing run at EUM Spring, they're looking like one of the favorite teams once again. The EU Masters group stage will begin on August 30th, the day after the LEC Summer Finals, so be sure to save the dates. Now, Carzzy won the EU Masters with Big all the way back in 2019, and in the LEC Summer Playoffs, he and Mad Lions look to defend their title.
Rogue, they became the first team in round 2, and today the Mad Lions and G2 Esports fight for the right to challenge them and a spot at Worlds.
We had a kind of a rough time right now, where we had some issues in the team, but after first game, I think that everyone knew that it's gonna be fine.
At every stage of the game, G2 have dominated this first one.
Even though we lost, we felt that it's dead. I think we showed up big. Now I'm feeling pretty well because we have won against G2 and we have qualified to Worlds.
But here it is Mad Lions that will reign supreme in the fifth. They will lock Worlds for themselves. They will dominate.
I know that no one can reign forever, so I knew that G2 is not gonna be there forever. Right now, I don't even think that G2's chances of winning the LEC are high or anything. Pretty bad looking for them. Well, before LEC, I was looking up to some LEC AD carries, but since I joined LEC, everyone become basically my rival. I have to defeat them, so I don't really care about them anymore. I only look up to Asian players because I don't think the EU players are that good. They might be good, but not on a level where I wouldn't be able to compete. It's more of a challenge playing against myself than against them. And we have nothing to lose. Basically, we are playing against Rogue. People are gonna expect a banger. I think we are gonna deliver. And no matter who wins or loses, I think we are gonna meet them in finals once again, no matter what. When I'm playing my best, I think that I'm the best AD carry by far.
Thank you so much for that, Carzzy, or the video team, I should say. He's always so chill, you know, when he's talking about winning the championship. But this is, of course, a rematch between EU's new top teams. It was a crazy series that went all the way to 5 games. And I just want to talk a little bit about how, in the last 2 years, Guldborg, these two teams have really established themselves at the top of Europe, perhaps coming out of nowhere, but not really, with solid fundamentals.
I definitely agree, because I think as a new watcher, you're like, oh, Rogue out of nowhere just became a top team. No, they started out poorly, extremely poorly. They had that 10th place team where they swapped in their back then academy roster, and all of a sudden, all right, they got 6th place or 5th place, and middle of the pack at least. And then they started moving up. They started building the fundamentals with their players, with the coaching staff, and with the people around it in total. And it's the same case for Mad Lions. They came through with rookies from the European Masters and people that were young and had the hunger for the championship. And that's what paved out and worked for these teams.
And Treatz, I think you as a player and being in so many team environments, you can probably really speak to the fact that it's not easy to find kind of the right mix of players and keep fostering those to get to a championship final.
Yeah, it's not only about having insane talent and insane staff around them. It's also about the players clicking, and that kind of takes time to figure out who clicks with who. And I think both Rogue and Mad have done a super good job of finding these players that click, and you can really see that it works on the Rift.
It's not always making, I think, the popular decisions, right, when it comes to rosters, but that's what Rogue and Mad Lions have done. And for more on Rogue, Laure is standing by with their coach.
Thank you, Sjokz and Freddie. Thank you so much for joining me ahead of this series, a rematch of the spring finals, as we often say. How is the team feeling right now, especially when you think about the results in spring and how to keep their heads up for this one?
I think actually we're quite excited for this game.
Yeah?
I think last week versus Misfits we were nervous, but this week to get our revenge on Mad, it's like an exciting prospect for us. So I think we're all pretty actually pumped for this one, and hopefully we can deliver.
Interesting, though. What made you more nervous playing against Misfits than the team who beat you in spring?
I think it was just kind of the pressure of last week, the whole playoff bracket, how it looked, the knowledge of what happens if you lose. Yeah, and so I think that added to it more than actually Misfits themselves. And obviously Misfits played really amazing in that series, but yeah.
That makes sense. And now you made Worlds, you know that you made Worlds, so focus on the finals perhaps. And rolling back a bit and thinking about Mad Lions last week and their series against G2, who would you say was the key pick from Mad Lions that series and the takeaways from you as you were watching the game?
I think both of the Mad solo laners played this game very well, especially when it came to team fights and knowing how they wanted to actually execute their comps. I think we were a bit surprised about the result because, in our opinion, G2 had been looking very strong in scrims, at least against us. So, for sure, how Mad was playing the map and team fighting was big factors in this win, I think.
It's interesting because right now Mad Lions looks to be the best LEC team when it comes to mid and late game team fights. What makes them scary, according to you?
I think the way they open up the map. They play very well on 2 lanes, and they draft very well for team fighting later on in the game. So if you don't build up these advantages early game against them with comps that are not so strong late game, I think you can suffer if you make a single bad move on the map. So in terms of that, we're trying to be very prepared on all these scenarios where we've made mistakes on before against them, and hopefully we can play them out correctly today.
Yeah, and we've seen Rogue drafting strong lanes usually, but we know about Rogue times and the memes about this. So how do you think you get a good situation in the early games today to not be taken by Mad's team fighting later on?
Well, I think really it's all about what happens before the team fights that kind of define how the team fight will go. So again, we just need to play out the map correctly, and these team fights, even if we have slightly weaker comps, if we draft for that today, then we will win those games. So it's all on us, and it's all on making sure that we do the correct things in game.
Last question for you about the jungle matchup, because we know how strong Elioya was, especially in spring, and given the fact that he was a rookie in the LEC season. But we also know that Inspired has been popping off lately, both on Viego, but also on other champs that the LEC jungler are not used to playing. So a couple words on the jungle matchup for today.
Yeah, I think you'll probably see more Xin, Viego, Lee. I don't think that Pix is going to be too crazy, but I think both junglers are in like top form right now. I think the meta very suits them. So I think it's very exciting to see them play against each other.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting matchup for sure. Freddie, thank you so much for the interview. I'll let you go backstage to your team, and good luck today against Mad.
Thank you.
And for more on Mad's team fight, let's send it over to Guldborg.
Thank you very much, Laure. Welcome back. Class is in session as we will be taking a look at Mad versus G2 and how they come back from a 1.5k gold deficit. Now, the situation is a bit dire for Mad Lions right now as they are pushing down the mid lane. And the reason for that is because they can no longer match Caps in the side lane. Caps has become incredibly fed on the LeBlanc, and right now no one is able to rival him in a 1v1 setting. So what we're going to be taking a look at here instead is the fact that Mad Lions is going to be looking to go for Baron because they know the only way they're able to beat them is going to be in a team fight setting. So as the clip rolls out once again, you can see that G2 immediately recognizes this themselves and they have to go for a team fight. They have to posture in for this one. But immediately, the way it's set up now, it's the fact that Fnatic, or rather Mad Lions, is already in a position where they know they want to turn here. You can see from the posturing of Armored that he knows he has to go for this. So as it does continue, you can see with the members of G2 being very grouped up around the pick, that's where the huge team fight happens. A huge gnaw from Armored combined with the support of Carzzy is able for them to get 1 kill on Wunder. And that is crazy considering the fight already went that well. But with the HP bar low, Fnatic, or rather Mad Lions again, does something extremely important. They start a bit of a fake recall, and that is because right now there's a worry for the rest of G2 that currently the Drake is alive. So therefore what they are going to be doing, G2, is they're all going to be moving down to that part of the map. But what Mad Lions rather is going to do instead is that they, with their healthy members, are going to stay around the Baron. And they're going to come in with the TP instead. So right now, they have a man advantage and they can just flash onto the rest of the members of G2. G2 now being desperate has to commit for the fight instead because there's nothing they can do if the game spirals out of control and G2 or Mad Lions gets the Baron. But that just creates an even worse situation for them. And because of this, with 1k gold deficit, Mad Lions is able to get back. And that is something Mad Lions does so well, so often, is that they draft a team composition where in the late game, in a team fight setting, they're able to outmaneuver their opponents and beat them.
Fantastic breakdown. I think you're with your head a bit in the Fnatic G2 match. I get it.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's totally fine. I think it's just the nature of us. We're talking about all these games in comparison to each other because we're comparing the metas, we're comparing the play styles. But in this case, as you showed, it is the fact that Mad Lions just seems to always find the upper hand when they are in a deficit. And I think that's what we're going to focus kind of this match intro in terms of the analysis on. Let's dive a bit deeper and start with the team compositions for Rogue. Let's take a look, Treatz, and tell me, what do these team compositions usually say to you about how Rogue likes to approach the game?
I think Rogue's plan is very simple in most of the drafts. Pick a lot of priorities so Inspired can control the map, and from there just get a small goal lead, continually increase it throughout the game, and then once the team fights happen, they have a 5k goal lead and it's way easier for them to execute. I
think it's also the way it's navigated with their composition. Outside of the 6 game, it's usually the pressure that's also going down to the bot lane. So if there is lane pressure from the bottom and the mid, they quite often do that and move it down to the bottom side, where Odoamne has to be a weak side instead and deal with his own resources.
But it's not like they don't have any team fight elements, right? But would you say that they are generally a bit lower in terms of the pure front-to-back team fighting than they are in other things compared to a team like Mad?
Yeah, Mad Lions always seem to go for this straight front-to-back teamfight comps with a lot of CC, whereas Rogue have a bit more individualistic power. They don't really have a 5-man core that Mad Lions does, so they kind of rely on this early goal lead to get their teamfights rolling.
Let's get some of the Mad comps up on the screen and then look at how they decide to draft and are more teamfight oriented. Does that mean they have to give up something on the other end?
I definitely don't think so. I think there's still the top side that they can play for with Armored. I think we saw that as well, but what they usually do is that they'll have the priority around the mid lane where you can see Rise, Twisted Fate, something that is able to recognize and threat a side lane instead, where the bot lane quite often are put in a position where they don't get too many resources. They just need to go even or be capable to be a team fight monster later. We've seen it so many times with Carzzy already, and that is the strength of that bot lane.
What goes into that thinking, Treatz, you as a previous and I think again bot laner yourself in the near future? What does that say about your confidence in terms of how you can perform versus your opponent if you're willing to take the weaker lane matchup in order to have the team plan fulfilled?
Yeah, Mad Lions bot lane, I think they're becoming more and more comfortable playing with each other throughout time. I think last season especially they had a rough time against Rogue in the finals, picking a lot of losing matchups and then losing them very hard. And I think if Mad Lions are to win today, they have to make sure their bot lane is a bit more stable and a bit more consistent in the lane.
I definitely agree with that sentiment as well, just because of the fact that how deadly the Rogue bot lane actually is. It's the bot lane with the most kills of the regular season in a 2v2 setting. So it is quite crazy how often they're able to get resources by themselves without even being in a position where it's a jungler that's backing them up.
Yeah, I'd love to keep talking about the bot lane for a little bit more. And I do also want to pull up the last time these teams met, Guldborg, Rogue versus Mad Lions. And it was kind of like a little bit of a carbon copy from that game 5 in terms of a comeback for Mad.
To me, this is the perfect game to tell the story of Rogue versus Mad Lions, because Rogue just had mid lane priority, bot lane priority, easy for the jungler to play the early game with this priority. But the problem for them is, and you can also see it in the gold lead, it just fell off. It reached a point where the composition was too low range. The gold deficit they had for themselves, it wasn't enough to actually get ahead with it to the point where you could get the Barons and start into the game. And then the late game teamfight champions from Mad Lions, they start to scale up and they start picking you off one by one to the point where they no longer could contest a Drake, and Mad Lions rather just ran away with the show.
But you did just say the Rogue bot lane, they do have their strengths, of course they do. They can be phenomenal as well, Treatz. So do you think they should play more towards that and go all in on their win condition in the bot lane for the side of Rogue?
I think Rogue's bot lane is always something that they can play for. I think for Mad Lions though, it's kind of easy to prepare for this because last finals they did have a rough time, and I think they learned a lot from that. And in general, Mad Lions bot lane has just been more consistent in this split than the last one. So I think it is something that Rogue can play for, but it's also kind of scripted in that sense, and they know what's coming.
We saw an example as well, Guldborg versus G2, the duo picks for the Mad Lions, and we picked out this one specifically. Of course, Reckless was playing Tristana for the entire series. Can you explain how exactly this embodies what Mad Lions likes to do?
I think it's genuinely a very good tell that they won't actually pick for the lane, because if you pick Rakan into Nautilus in laning phase, you're going to be having a horrible time. One of Rakan's biggest weaknesses is the fact that when he's getting CC'd down, he don't get to be that immobile, or that mobile rather, support that he is. The same for the Ezreal. Takes some time for him to scale up with the correct items to the point where you're fully a threat in the late game. But they don't mind doing that because, as Treatz already talked about, they're so good at being consistent and playing from behind in the early game that they have the mentality that it doesn't matter. As soon as they get to the team fight, that's where they're their comfort.
I love this deep dive into the bot lane matchup specifically. There are across the board so many to look out as they are already having a lot of fun there. The Mad Lions, Treatz, maybe a final note on the team playstyles. We saw, for instance, the jungler super hyped coming into this as well. Outside of the bot lane, what do you have your eye on as to be the most influential lane or player in this game?
I think outside of the bot lane, the mid jungle will be super exciting to see. I think if Mad Lions consistently win mid jungle, that also means that their bot lane will get alleviated way more pressure and be able to play the map safely. So I think whoever wins the mid jungle most games in the series will win the series overall.
I'm hearing a lot of Mad Lions. I wonder if that's going to be reflected in the predictions. You know, if you look at the best of 5 that they've played, in the summer of 2020, Rogue 3-0'd the Mad Lions. But in 2021, in spring, twice, once 3-1, once 3-2 in the final. So it looks like in the best of 5s, the new iteration of Mad Lions has the upper hand. Is that going to be reflected in the predictions? Guldborg.
Okay, I'm just going to put this out there. I am also from the LPL, and I'm a very big believer if you're able to control the game from the early game and just choke out your opponent afterwards, you are able to just win the game. And I think Rogue has a style like that with their strong laners. I think it's incredibly close between these two teams, and a lot of it is going to come down to the drafting as well. But I'm predicting a 3-2 for Rogue.
Another 5-game series and a win for Rogue. Wonderful. Treatz?
Every time I've been on the analyst desk, it's been 5 games. So I'm going to break that curse and say that Mad Lions win 3-1 today.
3-1 this time. Discord votes are also in. Their prediction is 3-1 for Rogue. Incredible between these two teams in terms of what is at stake here. The Kings match, the best teams so far in the playoffs who are fighting at the end for a great seed at Worlds and a spot in the LEC final. Rogue and Mad Lions face off in a much anticipated rematch.
Yeah, hey, how you gon' feel when I take it? How you gon' feel when I take it? We about action, we don't say. We about action, we don't say. How you gon' feel when I take it? How you gon' gon' feel when I take it. We about action, we don't say